Do this. Okay. Yep. Okay, so it looks like we had some technical issues. I'm going to reintroduce Lisa.
Thank you.
Um, we are delighted to have Lisa Montanaro with us. Her debut novel, Everything We Thought Was True, released in January 2025. It was awarded Best New Fiction by the 2025 American Writing Awards, first place for LGBTQ fiction by the 2024 International Firebird Book Awards, honorable mention for general fiction by the 2025 Los Angeles Book Festival, and it was a finalist in LGBTQ fiction by the National Indie Excellence Awards. We are very excited to hear more about her process and the ways in which you can turn fact into fiction in your own writing.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and welcome. I am so thrilled to be here, and I would like to thank the Tuckahoe Public Library for hosting me and during National Library Week. So many of you know, of course, that it's National Library Week. And if you're watching this after the fact and it isn't National Library Week anymore, then that's okay. You want to know why? Because I think it's National Library Week every week. So National Library Week, I think, was started in 1958 as a national observance by the American Library Association, and it's celebrated. And I'm just really filled with joy that we get to do this during that week. So you'll see in my virtual background here, I didn't have a virtual background for Tuckahoe Public Library, and of course that's your home library. But this is Yolo County Library, which is where I live in Northern California. But I'm from New York originally. I'm from Westchester County, and I have family in the Tuckahoe area. So I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share the slides, and I'll also tell you how you can get your hands on them yourself. So you should be seeing the slides. This is Turning Fact into Fiction, Mining the Truth to Influence Your Writing. And as Maria mentioned, this is for the Tuckahoe Public Library. If you are a library member, then go ahead and share that in the chat. Let us know. If you're a member of a different library, that's fine. Also, we love all libraries, and so we would love to hear which is your home library. So today we're going to be going over turning fact into fiction, how to mine the truth to influence your writing. And so here's a little bit of a roadmap of what we'll be covering today. So we're going to look at motives and methods for mining the truth, selecting the format of your writing and the genre that you might be writing in, facing your fears, because as we'll talk about, it can be very vulnerable to mine your own truth, your own life, your own personal experiences, and put them into your writing. We'll look at how writing fact into fiction affects the elements of writing craft. So, what are some craft writing tips when you're dealing with writing the truth? We'll also briefly cover privacy and legal issues. And that's because I have a background as an attorney, so I can't help putting on that hat when we look at writing about the truth, including people that are maybe still alive. So we'll actually briefly touch upon that. And then branding and marketing issues. So if you're writing something that's based on fact, do you want to admit that in your branding and marketing? For example, do you put in your bio the way I do? I put that everything we thought was true is inspired by my family story. So I'm sort of owning the fact that even though this is fiction, that it stems from some truth. And so I've used that very openly in my branding. And look, I'm actually presenting a workshop, a talk on this very topic. But there are some authors that do write fiction that is based on the truth, and no one ever knows it except you, or maybe somebody really close to you. So we can briefly touch upon that also. We'll look at some examples of some books that have used truth as the sort of core of the onion. And I'd love to hear some examples from all of you also. And then I'll leave you with some resources. You will have access to this entire PDF of this slide deck. So you can go to tinyurl.com/turning fact into fiction. And I think Miriam might be able to put that in the chat for you if she's
Yep.
able to. And
Let
if not,
me
I'd be happy
get
to.
the link. It's just sent it to us.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
And you should be able to access it, but if you have any problems, just let us know and we'll be happy to get it to you after the fact. So a little bit about me, as I mentioned, I am a native New Yorker now living in Northern California. I'm a published nonfiction author, and we'll talk about how nonfiction has different categories where truth can show up. and I'm also a novelist. So my debut novel, as Mariam mentioned, is Everything We Thought Was True, and it released January 2025 by Red Adept Publishing, and it is available in paperback, digital ebook, and audiobook formats. And if you are not part of the Tuckahoe Public Library System or the Westchester County Library System, and it's not yet in your library, then please do me a solid and request it. So people always say, I feel bad getting an author's book at a library. First of all, don't ever feel bad reading a book in any format from any source. And libraries are our third, there are living rooms, there are a community gathering spaces, they're learning laboratories for learning and reading. And so please feel free to go get my book and any other book and every other book at your library. For many of us writers, that is where we first went. My Judy Blume books came from the library, and my Nancy Drew books, and my Diary of Anne Frank. And so they are our friends. I am a frequent presenter for writer conferences, webinars, podcasts, libraries, bookstores, and I am a writer coach that helps other writers on business, branding, mindset, and productivity. So there's a phrase out there that you may have heard called write what you know, and I put it in quotes because it's kind of passed around a lot to a lot of different people. And what that means is that many writers are told when they first start writing to write what they know because they have a life that's filled with all these personal experiences, family history, and it does provide rich source material for storytelling. And we will do a little self-reflection exercise next, where I will ask you to start thinking about some of your personal experiences and family history that you may want to or already have put into your writing. So truth can provide this sort of scaffolding for a fictional story. So even if you're not writing fully truth or full memoir, you may use it as sort of the building blocks of a novel or a short story, for example. And then breaking down writing craft elements can give you practical tools to use in your own work. There's a great quote by the phenomenal Anne Lamott, and I'm assuming many of you have probably read her books, but if not, she's just an amazing writer. And she said, every single thing that's ever happened to you is yours, and you get to tell it. If people wanted you to write more warmly about them, they should have behaved better. You're going to feel like hell if you wake up someday and you never wrote the stuff that is tugging on the sleeves of your heart. Your stories, memories, visions, and songs. Your truth, your version of things in your own voice. And that quote is such a great building block for this presentation and to go into this self-reflection. So first, are you published or pre-published? Notice how I didn't say not published or not yet published. I think it's very empowering. If you would like to, by the way, you do not have to be published to call yourself a writer. You are a writer if you write. But if you'd like, and you can write for yourself. And not only is that okay, but as a lifelong journaler, someone that's been journaling since I'm 8, I think writing for yourself is a wonderful thing on so many levels. But if you'd like to get published because you want other people to see your work, and if you're serious about getting published, then I'm going to ask you to change your wording and to say, I'm pre-published when you introduce yourself. So if someone's like, so are you a writer? You say, yes, I'm pre-published and I'm working on blah, blah, blah. So it's a little more empowering. And if you are published or pre-published, in what formats and genres? And we're going to look, I promise if you don't know what I mean by that, we'll look at a slide of the different formats and genres where you can maybe turn fact into fiction. What is your current work in progress? Are you working on a personal essay, a memoir, a short story, a poem? Are you journaling actively right now as a form of writing and maybe something more therapeutic or cathartic for you to process your days or your experiences? Do you have a truthful story you've been interested in writing about? Maybe you haven't put words to it yet, but do you have a truthful story that's been tugging at the sleeves of your heart, as Anne Lamott says? And does that truthful story show up in any of your manuscripts or other pieces of writing? Has it shown up in the past, or are you hoping it shows up in the future? What drew you to that material or made it feel important to explore? Why did you think this is something truthful that I'd like to write about? And when you decide to do that, or if you've decided to do it, did you fictionalize it or does it remain nonfiction, meaning that you said, this is the truth? This is a personal essay, a memoir, etc. So I'll give you a minute or two to do this self-reflection. You can jot it down or you could just let the wheels start turning. And by the way, if any of you would like to share anything in the chat, please, please do so. I'll check the chat constantly, and we have wonderful helpers here that can check the chat. So if you want to answer any of these questions in the chat, please be our guest, and we welcome it. So if you're working on anything, or if any truthful experiences have shown up in your writing or are nagging at you to be included and you feel comfortable, you can let us know, even if you don't want to say what they are. Yeah. So I wrote my novel inspired by my family secret. And I'll show you later on that it did not start as a novel. And so if some of you are like, I'm starting with some personal essays, I'm thinking about a memoir, and then you realize you want to shift and make it fiction, then you can do that. And other people start with fiction and then realize they're writing the truth, which is interesting. They sort of come in through it, they reverse engineer it. And what's fascinating about when you do write something based on the truth is that sometimes the truth is what people don't believe. Readers will say, well, this part, it probably didn't happen in your real life, but this one did. And then I'll say, actually, that part was the truth. This other part I made up. And they go, oh, yeah, which is interesting. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, as they say. Fact is stranger than fiction. Okay, well, if anyone would like to share anything, great, put in the chat. And if not, I will go ahead and move on. So why might we include the truth? Like, why would we mine the truth? What are our motives? One of them might be to better understand an experience. So you often will better understand something when you write about it. For some people, it's a great form of processing trauma, loss, grief, or something that haunts you. And sometimes you write to feel closer to someone, living or dead. I often write about people I've lost as a way to sort of memorialize them on the page. And I don't mean an official obituary, but I mean a short story or a character that's based on them in a novel, etc. Sometimes you write because the story is just too good to not tell in some form. You just think, wow, I have to get this in some form of writing. The last one I don't think is a good motive, but I put it here in case it's knocking on your door, to even a score or get revenge with someone. Be careful with that, please. That is not usually a good motive. That often, in my opinion, is something you write for yourself. You put that in a journal, you write a letter to someone and never send it. But usually if you want to get revenge or even a score, probably shouldn't be in writing that you wind up sharing with the world. Now, if you do that, you probably will change it a lot so that it is not clear exactly who and what you're talking about. Does anyone have any other motives for minding the truth that I didn't cover? I'd love to hear them if you're like, wait, I have one that you didn't cover. Put it in the chat for us or feel free to unmute yourself. It's always good to hear what makes someone want to mind the truth other than the ones that are listed here. By the way, the psychologist Carl Jung, and I'll talk about this more in June when I present on family secrets, he says that secrets are psychic poison. Oh, I love that phrase. And so they make very rich source material. Okay, so someone said, I have several disabled people in my circle, and I was interested in combining several of them into a smaller set of characters. Okay, so what I think you mean by that is rather than having the whole ensemble, you could maybe, come down to 3 characters that embody a lot of the same types of abilities. The fundamental story would be about a woman with a progressive disabling illness who has lost her brother due to an overdose. She has to adjust her future plans because she was relying on him, to take care of her as she deteriorates while also grieving his own death. That's a very interesting story. So, first of all, I think it's a wonderful story because you would then have representation of persons with disabilities in your novel. And it's always wonderfully empowering for people to see representation of themselves, and especially identities that aren't written about as often as others. So, and as someone that comes from a family with deaf family members and who speaks sign language and worked at the New York School for the Deaf in White Plains, I'm a big disability rights advocate. So I love this concept, this premise. So what you're doing is you're mining the truth, which is know that you have a lived experience of being surrounded by people with beautiful different abilities. And then you're combining them into composite characters to capture some of the most important elements of that lived experience. Then you have a separate issue of grief and loss of someone that is both grieving for the person they lost and at the same time is grieving for the future version of themselves that they thought would be in existence. So they have this sort of double loss experience because they're now thinking it feels selfish to think, well, what about me? And yet it's a reality for them. So I hope you write this. I think this is a really, really good story. And it sounds like it would be fiction. So you would turn this into fiction, and you're using this type of personal truth to put into the writing. So that's a great example for us. Let's just look at the definitions of fact and fiction. So fact is usually something that can be proven and is universally acknowledged to be true. Now, this is a tough conversation to have right now in our history because we're at a point in time where, based on tons of information that's being thrown at us, and information coming from different sources, it's difficult sometimes to cite the source material, and sometimes we don't know if something is misinformation or disinformation. But most of the time, let's say 98% of the time historically, a fact is something that is empirically proven by some type of evidence and is usually acknowledged to be factual and true. Fiction is a story that is based on actual events or people, but pardon me, that is not based on actual events or people, but rather on the author's amazing imagination. And so, an emotional truth, you'll hear me talk about that a few times during this talk. An emotional truth is sort of the middle of the onion, like the inside layer of the onion, is that the emotions of the story are true. They're based in some type of truth that you've experienced, yet you've changed a lot about on the outside layers of that onion. So I'll give you some examples of that. And so think the essence, the core, the meaning of the event or experience that you put into the story or the book is preserved even when facts are altered. So going back to the sort of hypothetical that someone gave us in the chat, um, the brother could die of a different reason. So the brother in this one died of overdose, perhaps due to addiction. Maybe the brother in the story eventually dies of cancer. Maybe it's a car accident. Maybe that's not important for the story, but the emotional truth of someone that is fighting a chronic disabling illness that's deteriorating and then loses their caretaker, maybe that's the core of the story. So you could also change the disability the person has. You could change how old they are or how progressed the disability is. So you can see that the emotional truth would stay the same of that story. Because the emotional truth of that story is I'm mourning the loss of a dear person I love who also was my future caretaker. And then turning fact into fiction is transforming real life events and experiences into these compelling narratives through fictionalization, really good character development, and taking a lot of creative liberties while maintaining some sense of authenticity and emotional truthfulness. So here are the different formats of writing. So you could turn your work in progress, what you're writing, into fiction, but you could also keep it nonfiction. So let's just stick with the nonfiction for a moment. With nonfiction, it could be a blog. You could be writing a blog. There are so many amazing blogs out there. There are also vlogs, which are video versions of that. They're very, very popular. You could write personal essays. So if you go onto a lot of the personal essay websites, let's say outside of your own website, you can look at Medium and Slate and New York Times Modern Love, Huffington Post Personal. So there are lots of wonderful websites, Substack also, where you can read personal essays. Years ago, and I'm aging myself here as a member of Gen X. Years ago, there was a great magazine called Real Simple, and sort of the creme de la creme was to get a personal essay in Real Simple, or O Magazine, for example. And there still are wonderful, wonderful formats for that. So personal essays are exactly as they sound. They are an essay that's personal and it's based on truth. So it is written in a nonfiction format, and you are revealing, like when you write this personal essay, you're revealing, I am the author, and usually these experiences happen to me or someone I know. Memoir is a long narrative form, so that is comes under the larger umbrella of nonfiction. It is called creative or narrative nonfiction, as opposed to prescriptive nonfiction, which is how-to books, which are, how to get organized, which was my first book called The Ultimate Life Organizer. And so thinking about whether you want to keep this truth, completely owning this as you writing it and your experience, you would be on that upper part here, blog, personal essay, memoir. If you decide that you want to fictionalize it, then you're moving into either short story or flash fiction, which could be even shorter, um, or you could be in a novel, which would be a full length book, the way you'd find on the shelves. Poetry. People always are surprised when I include this. There are many amazing poems that have emotional truth at their core. Maggie Smith is a wonderful poet. She wrote Good Bones. She also wrote a great memoir called, I will think of it in a minute. That's not the name of it, but that's a great name. Let's, I'll think of it, I promise. It's You Could Make This Place Beautiful. It's a great memoir. She has many poems that are based on her truth, and it's quite obvious that she's talking about herself. And then there's screenplays. If anyone's interested, you could be writing a screenplay for a film, a TV series, a play, or a musical. And all of those can be fictionalized versions of some truth in your life. Is anyone writing anything that I didn't cover here? I'd be so curious to see what it is. I don't think I left anything out, but if I did, if you're like, hey, Lisa, I'm writing this and it's not showing up on your slide, then pop it in the chat for us.
I'm kind of curious about the role of humor in fictionalization and memoir, because I know a lot of people who their like urge to share a story starts with, well, this funny thing happened.
Hmm.
And yeah, so like we mentioned all of the emotional reasons uh, to plumb your story, but like I feel like the one of the most common impulses is to make other people laugh with
Yeah.
a personal experience and to have them relate to you that way.
I love that. I think I might add that to the motives. So I just came back from speaking at the Irma Bombeck Writers Conference, and she was a national treasure and a humorist. And Stephen Rowley, the author of The Guncle Abroad, The Celebrants, is, I think, one of our best humorists today who can write comedy with so much heart that you're also crying. And so he does a great job of, mining the truth of his experiences in his life to turn it into fiction that really tugs at your heartstrings, but also makes you die laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Some
would
of my
agree with you.
some of my favorite reading experiences kind of get my guard down by making me laugh, and then
Right.
they hit me with the emotions once I'm
Yes.
relaxed.
Yep. Yeah, and that's such a great way to put it. Like, exactly. They relax us and all of the guards go down and we're really laughing and then they hit us with the emotional core or truth of it. So I would agree with you. I think that's a great addition. And so could you write, there are some amazing personal essays. David Sedaris is a great example. His books are memoir. So, I'm trying to think, he has the funniest names also for his books. I've seen him, three times now in person, and he talks about his experiences, and that's exactly what he puts into his books. And you are laughing, and yet the themes, if you think about it closely, the themes are homophobia, the themes are growing up with disability, family dysfunction. But as you said, he he makes it accessible through humor. So humor helps with accessibility, and humor helps with vulnerability. So I do love those additions. Thank you. So how to decide on format. So your writing background. So, for example, if you are a humorist, if you know that when you write it, it's going to be funny, then stick with that. It works for you, and you have a great writing experience. Your readers have a great reading experience. If you're more like me, I'm a dramatic writer, which is so ironic because in real life, I consider myself sort of a very sort of fun, sunshiny type person. But when I go to write, I open a vein and bleed on the page. It's just my husband and I laugh about it. He's like, could you try a rom-com one of these days? Because, you love to watch them. And in real life, that's kind of more your personality. I'm like, I could, I just don't know if I'd be able to pull it off. So we shall see. But stick with your writing background, your skill set, your style, and your preference. And then what's your comfort level or your vulnerability and your privacy implications of publishing or marketing a memoir? So if you know that there are real fears, and we'll talk about those because of certain themes, certain people, certain experiences, um, then you may resist that and you may immediately go to fiction. Or it may start on a more memoir, personal essay basis, and then you may convert it later on. If you do choose to write something as fiction or a novel, then you will always bring authenticity to it based on your lived experience, even if it's fiction. And so, if you do write a novel and someone's like, where did you ever come up with the idea? Like Lessons in Chemistry, Bonnie Garmis, right? Where did you ever come up with the idea to have Elizabeth Zott be a rower to ride crew? Such a very unique thing to give that protagonist. And she said, because I do it in real life. So it was so easy for me to write about it because I ride crew. So there you go. Like it's just one nugget in that book, but it makes up quite a big part of her personality, her character profile. And so even if you choose to package and write something as fiction, you can always bring your lived experience into it. There is a term called autofiction. It's also known as fictionalized memoir or autobiographical or true novel. Think of it as veiled fiction. What it does, though, is it explains the relationship of the author to their work. You will not see it at the library on a shelf. Usually, you don't, I mean, maybe your library is different, but you usually don't see autofiction. You don't see it in a bookstore. The publishing industry doesn't say this is autofiction, but usually the author will sometimes own that themselves. And so, if you are going to submit your work to a publisher, or an agent, a literary agent, or a magazine, for example, or a website, you probably won't say this is autofiction. They really want to know which one of the sort of recognized categories does it fall into. Is it, if you're putting it in a short story anthology, they'll just want to know if it's a short story. The readers, we'll talk about that, are going to want to know what's true. The readers have a really strange fascination with trying to speculate and figure out what's truth and what's fiction. And a lot of authors have talked about this. Anne Patchett has talked about this a lot. She said, if I could tell you how many times when I'm doing a presentation, um, I'm asked, like, so how much of this is autobiographical? Stephen King, of course, laughs about it because he writes horror. So people will ask him, and he said, yet there are many things that are based on the truth, not the killing people part, but like little nuances of the characters. For example, if any of you remember Carrie, which might have been his first book, if I'm not mistaken,
It
but
was.
yeah, he said that some of the characters in there were based on some of the students in his class that lived in poverty and couldn't change their clothes and were made fun of. And he gave that to the character as a way for us to understand her grief, her loss, what we call her misbelief, her wound. So sometimes, again, there's just little snippets of it. So thinking about, if you did write something that's autobiographical, some authors embrace this and they freely admit it. They say, this book is based on my family history. This book is based on my father. This book is based on me living through 9/11. I mean, they own it. Whereas other authors will either not comment on it, not confirm it, or rapidly reject the idea. And any of those are okay. It is completely up to you. The only thing I will say is with the internet, if it is out there already and then you reject it, people will question and second guess and keep going for you. So think about if it's very widely known, then what I would recommend is to own it, but then you decide how you will describe how much of it you put into your novel and how much you changed, even if you just say, I changed some of it, which is okay. So truth crosses genres. So what I love about this is how much it shows up in genres. And so, for example, Miriam just mentioned it shows up in comedy all the time. Some of my favorite, like one act, one woman show, one act plays are based on the truth, right? So memoir, truth crosses genre because it shows up in memoir. Historical fiction is often either based on a real event or a real person or a real experience. Family drama, a lot of truth shows up in family drama. Mystery, a lot of people will say thriller, psychological thriller and mystery has truth in it. Absolutely. True crime will often turn into fiction. Someone will fictionalize or reimagine some crimes in the past and etc. And then domestic suspense. And can you think of others? So, what are some others where you see truth popping up? We're going to look at a few examples, but just curious if you could think of any other genres. We added comedy or humor.
I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction, and some of the stories in that will take like some fundamental truth
Yeah.
and exaggerate it significantly, like turn it into a fantastical element of the story. A very popular element of robot fiction is the Pinocchio story, like what makes us human and how does that apply to people that we wouldn't think of as human.
Hmm.
Um,
I
uh,
love that. Yeah.
yeah,
I have
so
two friends in my writers group that write sci-fi and fantasy, which is not a category that I write, but I do like to read. And you're right. Some of them will take like elements of the truth and then expand on them or throw them on their head and let us look at them in a different way, which is really
yeah.
neat.
And
Yeah.
science fiction in particular is like the allegorical
Yep.
genre where you
Yeah.
take something, some element of real life and twist it slightly so that you can approach it with a new perspective or be less invested in it. Taking something that is a really charged subject and
Yeah.
fictionalizing it just enough to give people that less investment so they
Right,
can
right.
see it in a
So they
different
can
way.
let go of expectations,
Yes.
right? And let go of confirmation bias of what they thought about it in the past and like recast their views. It's actually a really great way to sort of teach people without them realizing you're doing it, right? Yeah. It's funny now that you're saying this, it's making me think of fan fiction. So fan fiction is interesting because it already starts as fiction, but if we're assuming that this fiction is based on a truth of like, well, let's say it's a character like Wicked, for example, by Gregory Maguire. Like what do we think as a fact of the Wicked Witch of the West, right? What do we think of her as fact, even though it's based on a fictional character? And then how does Gregory Maguire recast, reimagine who that person is? So even though it's not quite truth, it's still a version of the truth that we've lived with for a long time. Same thing with like you'll see tons of books that play with the Jane Austen like Pride and Prejudice trope, and they'll recast and reimagine that. So it's not quite truth because it was always fiction to begin with, but it is the truth of that particular book or that particular fictional character. So I think that's a little bit of a twist on that I never thought about before. So I would probably say fan fiction isn't quite truth crossing a genre, but it is a little bit of that version when you start to really think about it. So, methods of mining the truth. So, if you wanted to try some writing exercises, there are two that I love. One of them I can attribute to the wonderful writing instructor, author, and painter and artist, Mary Carroll Moore. I took a class with her at the Hudson Valley Writers Center a long time ago. It is a great place because it's right on the Hudson River. I think it's in an old railroad building. And she now teaches online and she teaches retreats, but she has this one exercise called River of Your Life. The other one, I apologize, I cannot remember who first came up with it years ago, but a lot of people use it, a lot of writing instructors, and it's called the 100 Moments. They're very similar, but let me just explain the difference. The 100 Moments is a list where you list 100 moments of your life that come to you. And you don't censor, you just sort of let it rip, like 100 moments. And some people say, I can't think of 100 moments. It's okay. Just try to do as many as you can. And then you study it and you look for patterns and trends to see where is the most engaging focus. So pay attention to the ones that bring up strong emotions, either, laughter, comedy, shame, anger, fear, love. And so you try to look for patterns and trends. Whereas the river of life is kind of cool because if you're picturing a river, and hopefully the river flows and it's got some bends and curves, the outer river is what happened to you. The inner river is how did you feel about it and how did it affect you? So think of the outer river as plot. It's the plot of your life. It's the what happened, like the actual occasions, moments, situations. And the inside of the river is why do we care? Why do you care? Why does it keep coming back to you? And it doesn't even need to be chronological. Neither of these need to be chronological. Like, please don't think of the 100 moments as from 0 to however old you are now. That would be a lot. So whichever one of these resonates with you, they're both really, really good exercises. And in a few minutes, we'll look at a later slide where we build on some of these and we take these memory retrieval exercises and then we can start to build more fiction out of them. Another way to mine the truth of your life internally is through therapy or counseling. Another way is photographs. It's like just go back and look at photographs of your life. There are so many stories there and moments that you may want to revisit in your writing. Your journals or diaries, or journals and diaries of a family member who left them to you. So don't go stealing any, please. And then former pieces of your writing. Like I went back and looked at my journal from when I studied abroad in the Netherlands at 21. And it was just fascinating to see what I acknowledged, what I cared about, what I wrote about. And I also sometimes, like, I looked at some poems I wrote in high school. And again, what did I put in those poems? So, this is how to mine the truth of your life internally. The next slide, we'll look at how to do it externally. Can you think of any other ways that you can mine the truth of your life internally that I didn't cover here? Yeah, I'm trying to think. If you think of any, they might be here in this slide, but if not, add them to the chat. So externally, you can interview people. So for my book, I interviewed my father. I'm lucky, fortunate that he's still living. And because the book was inspired by my family and by his life, I wanted to interview him. And by the way, folks, that's how I started knowing I was writing fiction. So I interviewed him way back in 2016, and I would ask him questions. And then apparently I would say things like, oh, I didn't know it happened that way. I pictured it like this. Or wouldn't it be cool if it had happened like this? And so he said, well, I think you want to write a novel because you keep picturing things in your own mind very differently. It's almost like you have a character in your head. And that set me down the path of converting those former personal essays into fiction. So interviewing people, oral histories. For my second book, it's historical fiction, takes place from 1950 to 1953, about a group of trailblazing women that broke barriers in the field of law. And I'm listening to oral histories of these women in their 80s and 90s who were in the field of law back in the 50s. And it is just amazing, amazing content. But I will be fictionalizing it because I'm not writing about particular women. I'm looking at them as composite characters. Cards and letters. So you have tons of cards and letters in your life, and those might also provide good external source material. Social media. You can go back and look at your social media, other people's, and then look at the first one under research, your library. So don't need to preach to the choir, but for anyone that's here that doesn't work for a library, doesn't visit the library often, or is watching this later on, libraries are just amazing sources of materials, and librarians can be huge amounts of help for figuring out some facts, past, present, and helping you. There are archives. I went to the archives of a major university and they gave me access as a researcher since I write. And I got 2 hours to look at amazing source books. Genealogy websites are also a great way to mine your truth. We're seeing a lot of books coming out now about DNA issues. People that thought their father was their father and they weren't. And so those are showing up in not just memoir, as we'll see, but in fiction. Yearbooks. Yearbooks are also a great way to go back and mine the truth. Like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that teacher and that experience. And then any other published works during the time period you're working on or writing about. So someone added, a family genealogist recorded the previous generation talking about their experience in the Holocaust. Wow. And we fortunately have those saved on CD and recorded on social media. Wow. And there are also objects. Yes, that's a great one. I love that. I'm going to add that. Objects of significance, big time. Special jewelry, special vases, recipes. So any objects of significance are also, yeah, a good one. Graffiti, tattoos. Yeah, those are good ones. I love it. Thank you for those additions. And I'm glad you have those oral histories. So, can you think of any examples of books that turned fact into fiction? So, before I give you my examples, I'm curious if you could think of some yourself.
One of my favorite authors worked a as the PR arm of a nuclear facility, and that apparently influenced a lot of his writing.
Yeah. Wow. That is probably going to fall under like, fact is stranger than fiction and going to give lots and lots of great material. So, yeah, that's a good one. Well, I've already mentioned my book to you, so I'm going to show you some other books. But what I want to mention is that I did start this as fact. So I did start it as personal essays and memoir and then decided to fictionalize it. And the characters are real and imagined, so they're composite. So some of them are made up of like three or four people I knew, and some of them are just completely fictional. The settings are a combination of real and fictional. So some of the settings, like the town of New Rochelle, the town of Pelham, those are real. I'm trying to think what else shows up. Los Angeles, that's real. The town of Orange is real. And then I made a town called Johnston, uh, which is not a real town in New York, based on composites of different towns. And then again with characters. And so you can make up things. I have two cafes in my book that are real. People show up, they're like, oh my God, that's a real cafe in Seal Beach. And then there are others that, restaurants and brand names that are totally made up. My research included interviews with family members, interviews with adult children of LGBTQ parents. So my book is about a husband and wife in the past who are dealing with a secret, which is that the patriarch of this Italian Catholic family is a closeted gay man from the 70s to the 90s, and the family hides it as a secret. And so in the past, you get the husband and the wife, and in the contemporary story, because it's dual timeline, you get the daughter story. So I wanted to not only interview people that were closeted uh, LGBTQ members, but also their children. And in order to really add a lot to the book, I did historical research. There is an LGBTQ history timeline at the back of my book. So even though it's fiction, as people are reading it, they can turn and see, well, when did Stonewall happen? When did the AIDS crisis happen, etc. And then I watched a ton of documentaries, film, and TV, which was really fun. Great source material to do. So novels. So here are some novels that are basically mining the truth and turning them into fiction. One of the favorite ones that I have is by Lori Frankel. It's called This Is How It Always Is. It's a wonderful novel, and it is inspired by her family story. Commonwealth by Anne Patchett is autofiction. It's fiction, but there are autobiographical elements of it that she took from her own life. David Copperfield, Charles Dickens. Go Tell It on the Mountain, James Baldwin. The Bell Jar, Sylvia Plath. My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, who still is one of the only authors to this day that we don't really exactly know who she is. She uses a pen name, and we haven't quite figured out exactly who she is. People have surmised. The Neapolitan novels are actually four different novels that make up the entire canon, and My Brilliant Friend is the first one. Half Broke Horses by Jeanette Walls, who also wrote, you'll see below, The Glass Castle. Now look at the difference. The Glass Castle is memoir. She's like, this is a true story. This is my life. Half Broke Horses is her grandmother's life. And her grandmother is now deceased. And she, meaning Jeanette, did not live these experiences and was only able to hear about them from her grandmother before she died and from other people in the family. But because she places herself in the story as if it's happening, she made it into a novel, which is interesting. Educated by Tara Westover is a memoir. She says, this is my story. Inheritance by Danny Shapiro is a memoir about finding out that her father is not her biological father after doing a DNA test. Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt is a memoir. It's his life. Traveling Mercies by the fabulous Anne Lamott, and then The Dance of the Dissident Daughter. And I will add the funny ones that we talked about earlier, which is David Sedaris, all of his memoirs. Um, are memoirs, meaning he says, these are all my life. There's a really funny one called something about corduroy pants, and there's another funny one called Naked, but they're all memoirs. And he doesn't only, own the truth, but he'll talk about it on stage. He'll bring his sister onto stage and tell stories about her, his husband, Hugh. So yeah, he's definitely admitting this as a brand. Any other examples now that you've looked at mine that you could think of? I'm gonna ask you after today, just start to look. Just say like, okay, wait, is this a memoir, creative nonfiction? Is this a novel based on truth? Yeah, etc.
A river runs through it, right?
Yes, a river runs through it. Great example. Yeah.
And I
So I
think
just,
the Brontes, I think of The Professor by Charlotte Bronte.
Okay, so that's another great example. So how much of that is auto fiction? We don't really know because they're not here and we can't ask them, but it's documented that some of it was drawn from their real life. Yeah.
so I
Mary?
just read The Correspondent,
Oh, yeah.
who, she apparently started writing when she was 9 years old. And I did too, but unlike her, I never kept my letters or the letters that I received. I never made copies of the letters I wrote, but I've always been writing. But I thought the book was fascinating because, just the way it was, because
I love that
I
book.
because I was able to relate to it.
Good. I love that book also. Epistolary novels are not always Um, some people don't like them. They're not their cup of tea. There was the Potato and Literary Pie Society, I think it's called, years ago, which was also written as an epistolary novel, meaning correspondence, letters, etc. And the correspondent is an interesting one. I don't know if Virginia Evans, the author, has autobiographical elements in the novel or if it's completely fiction. But it certainly was a very interesting format, and I like you, Mary, it resonated with me a lot. But somebody just read it that I know, and she was like, "Oh, I hated that. It was all letters." So I'm like, "Okay." So this is why we have so many great books because there's different strokes for different reading folks. So, just in the interest of time, because I want to save some time, I know you've been able to contribute, but I want to make sure we save time for some questions. If you have fears around this, some of the internal fears may be trusting your memory. So you might be like, I don't remember all this. And that could be a reason why you fictionalize it, because you really are nervous about remembering the truth. And so you're worried about how truthful you'd actually be. And if that's the case, think about factual truth versus emotional truth. You may not remember the facts, but pull out the emotions to put into your writing, whether those emotions are funny, sad, scary, etc. Sometimes you don't want to out yourself. Like there's just, it's too much of a personal issue that you just don't want to share with people. So you put it into a character or a story. And then sometimes you need to manage the expectations of other people because you know that like certain friends, family would not feel comfortable with you writing about them. So you totally change the character. And then external fears are, do you need to get someone's permission? Is this really your story, or does it affect other people? Will you offend someone? Are there some ethical issues involved to writing about this story? Is there will it be socially stigmatizing to you or others? Will you be causing harm to a marginalized community? Um, and are there any legal repercussions? Which I'm not an attorney, but that is something that memoirists do have to think about, and novelists, if they're truly fictionalizing, do not. So just keep that in mind. And then writing as an act of vulnerability. So if you are writing something that's very painful, you want to protect yourself and, take breaks and just recognize that writing about the truth can often bring up a lot, can release a lot, unveil a lot. And so sometimes it can be difficult for people. And even humorists have talked about this, that sometimes they're crying even while they're making others laugh in their writing. So just something to think about. So in the interest of time, Miriam, I want to make sure we're going at the top of the hour, correct? Yeah. So I'll probably skip some of the deeper craft elements, but I want to just show you one or two that I personally think are important. So the differences between nonfiction and fiction, there are many, but these are the three that I think are the most important when you're trying to decide if you're writing completely true, personal essay, memoir, or a novel. You'll hear the terms out there, show, don't tell. And if you pick up a really good novel, it should have what's called showing on the page. It does less exposition, less telling. And it has a lot more description. So you'll be able to use the senses as an author and as a reader. So you'll have visual imagery, taste, smell, trying to think, hearing, like what's the character tasting, smelling, hearing, experiencing, touching. And then there'll be dialogue. Sam said, "Seriously, Elaine, you have such a beautiful set of hair tonight. Like your hair looks great." You don't do that in nonfiction. You don't pick up a nonfiction book and have dialogue in it. However, memoir now is being written more like a novel. So if you pick up a novel, pardon me, if you pick up a memoir now in 2026, it's going to read more like a novel, including it may even have dialogue. It may even have some description. Decades ago, it did not. So the lines are blurring a little more these days, but in general, these tend to be the three things that you'll see separate them. Resources for you. So Jane Friedman writes a lot about writing and publishing. And she has a great article here called Turn Fact into Fiction Without Hurting Someone or Getting Sued. So if you're a little more interested in that angle, it'd be a great one to look at. Lori Moore is a novelist and has admitted that there is some autobiographical element in almost every one of her novels, but she won't tell you which ones they are. She's very sort of hush-hush about it. It's actually part of the mystery. So that New York Times article is about that. Harold William Thorpe, if you are going to write your family story, he has a really nice blog series about how to do that, really broken down for people that want to write family stories. The Novelry has writing a book about your life, just a nice general blog post. And then again, Harold William Thorpe. Oh, I have it twice. It's so damn good. I put it twice. Sorry about that. Didn't even notice that. I'll pop the other one off of there. Yeah. So final thoughts. Zora Neale Hurston famously wrote in her 1942 memoir, Dust Tracks on a Road, "There is no agony like bearing an untold story inside of you." So I hope this session has inspired you to investigate the stories that are within you that are incredibly rich, that have emotion and love and humor and hurt. And I hope you decide to bring them into the world. If you have any questions, I'll stick around. Feel free to ask questions out loud. Feel free to put them in the chat. You can always email me. I'll give you my email for the future if you need it. And hopefully you feel more empowered to turn fact into fiction or to stick with nonfiction if that's a better match for you. So there's no wrong or right. Hopefully you'll join us on June 23rd at 7 p.m. when I present Writing Family Secrets, Drama, Discovery, and Mystery, which is hosted by the fabulous Tuckahoe Library. And if you want to stay in touch, you can go to my website, lisamontanerowrites.com. And if you just put Lisa in front of that, Lisa at Lisa Montanero writes, then you can email me, and I'm on all the social media. I am one of the authors that's out there. So I'm out there in general, and then I'm also out there about the fact that my first story is based on the truth. So, any questions or comments or epiphanies before we finish up?
This was
I,
excellent.
I didn't get to write that before I went off. Is somebody gonna
Uh,
send me?
Mary,
yeah,
here you
so
go.
I'm going to send out. Lisa graciously gave us all the slides tonight, so
Oh,
I
good.
can send that out to everyone who registered. And this has been recorded, so we can also put it on YouTube for future reference.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
Hmm.
You're welcome, Mary. Thank you. And Elaine, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad you enjoyed this and got good value out of it. That makes me happy.
Well, I think, there's so much here. And Mary, we're in memoir class together. She's a fantastic writer. And I'm sure, everybody here would agree. It, to me, you've given us permission. I think for me, the fear factor was very big, and just being able to start, not being afraid to start, and um, it was just great. I can't wait to review everything that you went over, and just very excited to share with others in our memoir group, and to promote your next program they could come to. And I'm glad that we have it recorded as well. So thank you for your generosity in sharing everything. And we look forward to the next program.
You're
Yes.
welcome. And I love hearing about your memoir group. And I love that you feel empowered. And you know this, but I will reiterate it. Not everything you write has to see other eyes, or not everything you write has to be revealed to other eyes.
Mhm.
So, people often ask me, do you have writer's block? I'm the opposite. I overwrite and then decide what to release into the world. And so that's very freeing to know that, I mean, I have scenes that didn't make it into my novel, as I'm sure many of you do, and, short stories and personal essays that never make it into the world. But sometimes pieces of them do, which is why you should still write them. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I
I've
love.
I've heard it said that no writing is ever wasted, even if
Right.
it doesn't go into the immediate story. It gets recycled, it gets reconstituted, sloshed around, and remade for something else.
That's a
Yes.
good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, yeah.
Well,
Awesome. Well, oh, go ahead, Mary.
oh, no, I was surprised last year because I s- I had submitted a piece to the memoir group about the time I did lifeguarding, but it wasn't like I wasn't a 20-year-old. I was 57. And so it was published, and I couldn't believe it. It wasn't a novel or anything. It was just a 900 piece about me passing the advanced senior life saving with two teenagers, one who didn't pass.
That
But
was
I wrote the
wonderful.
story, and I was like, they treated me like a celebrity out where the story was published. It was so uplifting that I said, oh, maybe I should write some other things, but I haven't sent anything else out. Maybe the
First of
smoking
all,
one.
first of all, congratulations
Oh, that
on
was a
getting
good
that
one.
published.
One. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Elaine.
No, she just wrote one one of the prompts was smoking.
Oh,
And, we all used to smoke, and boy, she really nailed it. It was great. It was so, so great.
well, congratulations on
Yeah.
getting that published, Mary. And you're talking to a former lifeguard at the Scarsdale Town Pool here.
Ah,
As
nice.
in, that's how I met my husband. So we were lifeguards together, and I was their swimming instructor for the camp and swim team coach. And I know how difficult it is to pass those tests at any age. And I love that you did it at 57. So that sounds like a fantastic personal essay. Yeah. So brava to you. And the smoking one sounds awesome also. So I love it. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
And
Thank
then
you
just one
so
little
much.
tweak. You don't need to use the word, it's just an essay. It's not, yeah, it is an essay and you got it published and you are a published author. So there's no reason to put that qualifier in front of it. Yeah.
Oh,
That's
well,
nice.
I don't know. I'd like to write a book, but I'm a little bit old now.
Nope. As Roxane Gay has a great essay in the New York Times, you could look it up. It's never too late. So
Oh,
maybe, yeah, it's a great one. And I work with a lot of writers. We did a panel last year called "It's Never Too Late," writing at any age, and keep going, keep going. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, my son always tells me, I'm going to publish you one day, Mom. I'm going to publish you. I don't know.
well, keep writing. That's what counts. So I'm
Yeah,
really happy that you have a
thank you.
memoir group. Yeah,
This is
and it's
very
been my pleasure.
interesting. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope I see you at Writing Family Secrets in June.
Yeah.
Is that in person, Lisa? Will you be joining us in person for
No,
that?
I wish I will not be there in June. I'll still be here. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, will I? No, I don't think I can make it. I know. I was trying to think. I'm like, where am I? I'll be in Southern California in June at a speaking engagement, and then yeah, I'll probably be coming back here. Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
Very
thank you
nice.
so much, Lisa. This has been really fabulous.
You're
And
welcome.
I'm absolutely looking forward to the next talk.
Good.
right.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. So have a wonderful, wonderful night, and I think you have everything you need to send to everyone.
Mhm.
And I will see you all very, very soon.
See you
Thank
soon.
Thank
you.
you so
Good
Take
night,
much.
care.
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.